We want to thank Chaim for sponsoring today's shir. Today's topic is a contemporary topic, and we will not exhaust it in our discussion. However, we will begin. It's contemporary. We labeled the Judaism under the microscope. And what in the world does that mean? You'll see. We begin with number one. Number one is a Rashi in this week's Parsha Shmini. Zois HaChaya, we have the laws of Kashrus. And Moshe Rabbeinu wants to make it practical. He wants to show. Now, people always say you can't just teach Bachrim Gemara. You got to really let them visualize it. Explain to them the exact measurements in today's terms, the worth of the coins in today's terms. Well, Moshe says, Rashi, Moshe says, Zois HaChaya, this is the Chaya. Melamed Shaya Moshe Oiches B'Chaya. Moshe was holding on to it. Umara Oisel Yisrael, he showed it to the Yidden. He said, Zois Teichlu v'Zois Loi Teichlu. He says, this yeah, this not. And says Rashi, Af b'shrotze hamayim, it wasn't just by the animals, but even by the insects in the water. Achaz mikol min v'min, every single min, Moshe Rabbeinu held in his hand, v'heder lehem, and he showed it to the Jewish people. V'chein ba'oif, so too by the birds, v'se'ela t'shaktzu, v'chein b'shrotzim, so too by the insects, v'zeh lochem atome. See, by each of them, Moshe Rabbeinu said this. Moshe said zeh, or zois, or eile. When you say zeh, this, you're pointing to something. Moshe wasn't just giving a shir and hoping for them to have a clear imagination, accurate imagination. No, Moshe said this. He literally pointed with his finger and he said this yeah and this name. And he did it by the animals, he did it by the birds, by the fish, and by the regular shrotzim. That's what Rashi says. Okay, it's already from Chazal or Gemara in Chulin. So the question is, what about the insects that were too small for Moshe to point to? If Moshe Rabbeinu had to point v'hera lehem and he showed it to them, so does that mean that the things that were too small to be seen don't count? That's the question. So, okay, so that's how it relates to this week's parasha. There is a well-known statement found in Gemara, 4 times in Gemara. Torah was given to human beings, not to angels. And therefore God does not expect perfection. He expects human perfection, to be as good as you could be. But he gave it to humans knowing our human shortcomings, and that's expected, and there's leeway for that. Torah was not given to angels. Loi nitna Torah l'malachi asharis. The Torah was not given to angels. And there's plenty more copies if anybody wants to. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu showed the Yidden everything he said, you don't have to trust me orally and verbally. You can actually look inside, then you will know that I'm not taking you for a ride. Although we do try to go on a journey. We're going on a journey. I'm taking you on a journey, but not a ride. So there are 4 instances in Gemara where you find this. So let's just have a look. In number 2 is a Gemara in Yuma. We know that when it comes to saying Krishma, saying words of Torah or davening, there cannot be exposed erva in front of you. The pasuk says, "V'lo yidro b'cho ervas dover." There can't be an erva in front of you. If there is, you can't speak holy words. You could think. Ervas dover, you can't speak. Here, what you're allowed to think, but not speak. The Rebbe once said about Bochum Go Mitzrayim on Friday that on the subway they'll say Shnai Mikra. There'll be Mai V'Sedra on the subway. Child, very often on a subway and there's a woman in front of you and she's if there's a tefach of a woman which is supposed to be covered and it's exposed, that's considered an erva, and it's almost unavoidable that will happen. So the question is, what did the Rebbe have in mind? If the Bochum turned the other way, okay, whatever, something to think about. But says the Gemara number 2, Amar Rav Papa, said Rav Papa, Soya bim koima. If somebody went, he's cleaning himself up after the bathroom, didn't do a perfect job. Something remains. Asur likros krishma. He's not allowed to say Shema till he cleans himself up properly. Okay? So if it ever happens that, there's no toilet paper, there's a guy in the stall, and the guy next door to him is knocking, you have any extra toilet paper? He says no. You have nothing.
Can't spare a square.
He says, how about 2 5s for a 10? Anyhow, but if it ever happens, you should know you got to wait to say Shema until you can remedy the situation. So frek the Gemara, what? Heichi domi, what's Rav Papa talking about? Ideniris, if what's there's so much that it could be seen by others if you weren't wearing clothes, pshita, then obviously that's a problem. Ideloiniris, if it can't be seen by the exterior eye, then we're not perfect, we're humans. What does the Eibush expect? That you have to, get a soap and a sponge and get a whole cleaning crew over there? We're human beings. What does the Eibush expect? If it can't be seen to the exterior eye, it should be fine. So Mara says, you're right. The case is, the Yoshev Veniris, that when you sit, it allows the remaining excrement to be seen, but when you stand, it's not seen. And that's the case of Rav Papa, that since when you stand it's not seen, maybe it doesn't count. Rav Papa says, no, it does, because when you sit, it's exposed. That's this Gemara in Yuma. But the Gemara makes mention of this idea that if it can't be seen while he's sitting, even if it's there, what do you want from the guy? It's not perfect. You can't expect someone to be perfect. We're human, we're not malachim.
In Hashgacha is also written that if you cannot see the insect, so
that's exactly what we're going to discuss.
You know it's there.
What if you know something's there, but you don't know what it is? Right. Okay, we're going to see about that. Exactly.
Strawberry the rules.
Yeah. So look at join me number 3. Number 3 is a Gemara in Brachos, a similar discussion. If somebody's completely naked, then you can't say the Eibishter's name. The erva has to be covered. Your own erva is also a problem. But imagine you're wearing a gown, you're in the hospital, you're wearing a gown, and you're covered from head to toe. But underneath the garment, there's air, there's space, it's not tight. So it's called your heart sees the erva. Liboy roya esa erva, your heart sees the erva. So that's a problem too, rabbinically, midrabanan. It's a chachomim b'geizer. They want you to wear something, the elastic of the underwear or pants would work. Anything which is tight, which kind of separates between the heart and the person's nakedness. The Gemara shaila here is, okay, let's say you have that elastic band on your waist somewhere, so it's between the erva and your heart. But the bottom of your legs, there's no separation between your heel and your erva. Is that a problem as well? In other words, right. In other words, briefs would be a chumrah versus boxers. Yeah. Briefs which stick to the leg would be a chumrah versus boxers. Anyhow, so says the Gemara, Itmar was said, this is Brachas Daf Chafei. Akevoi royes, if your heel sees the erva.
What did the Kayanim wear?
If he sees it's mutter. The Gemara said it's mutter. What about noigeya? What if it's touching? What if somebody's sitting and, I can't do it, but people a little smaller than me are able to, to cross their legs, sit on their legs. If you're just wearing a garment, just a robe, and you sit with your legs crossed, your heels could be touching your erva.
What's the thing with the heels?
But Abaya Amar Asurdov Amar Mutter. There Abaya and Rava disagree. Abaya says it's a problem. Rava says it's fine. Even though it could rub against it and it could get the thoughts going. That's what now. Rav Zvid Masni Lo Lahosh Maita Hachi. Rav Zvid quoted the halachic version the way we just said it. Rav Chinana Brei Ravika Masni Lo Hachi. Rav Chinana has the version a little different, which is like this: Noigeya, if it's touching, Divrei Hakol Osir. Everyone holds it's a problem. If you're sitting with your legs crossed and the heel touches the erva, it's a problem. But everyone agrees, right? But the machloikas is if you can just see. That's the debate. Abaya Amar Asr. Abaya said it's the problem. Rava said it's mutter. Loinitna Torah lamalachei hashadas. The Torah wasn't given to angels. What do you expect? The guy's he's wearing a gown. He's covered from his neck to his toe, right? He's completely. You have and not just that. He's wearing the waistband. He has his so between the erev and his heart. Now you have a problem between the heel and the erev. What do you want from the guy? We're trying to bust his chops. Torah wasn't given to malachim. That's what Rava says. And the halacha takiz azoi noigeya also if it's touching is a problem. If it's just roy, if it just sees his mutter. So this is another instance where this. Idea is used for halachic purposes. Okay? Join me in number 4 on the other side. Number 4 is a Gemara in Kiddushin. It's talking about is the opinion of Rab Meir. If somebody's Makadosh, he betroths a woman, and now he's a Kohen, right? And he ends up using his big day kahuna. He's Makadosh to Isha under the chuppah. There's no ring, right? With Kohenim, they never follow the norm. There's no ring. He takes out of his backpack, his katoinas, and he says, here you go, you're Mekudeshes to me. So here's the issue. The clothes of the Kohenim are hektish. They're consecrated clothes. They're holy. If you misuse hektish items, it's called me'ilah. Now here's the thing. Rab Meir's opinion is, if you actually betroth a woman with such an item, it becomes what we call misappropriated. It becomes nischalal. It becomes profaned. And the Kiddushin actually takes effect. You violated Me'ilah, but the Kiddushin actually takes effect. But there's one case where Rab Meir agrees the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. And that is number 4, Mishnah Seinu B'Ketoinus Kahuna. When it comes to the clothes of a Kohen, Shaloi Balu, that have not yet withered out, so they're in use, Hoyel v'nitnu leihones bahen. Since you're allowed to use them, lefi shaloy nitnu Torah l'malachi asharis. What that means is like this. If generally hektish property can't be misused, so what's the Kohen supposed to do the moment the time of his job ends? The moment the time of his job ends, right, the avoid is over, in an instant, in the blink of an eye, he needs to be out of those clothes. Because any moment that he tarries, he's using for his own personal benefit sacred items, right? During the avodah, that's what they're for. But the moment he's no longer in the service, so in the afternoon he's done, he's going home. At that very moment, he's getting benefit, physical pleasure from a hektish item. How can he do that? So the Gemara says Torah wasn't given to angels. A malach, maybe the moment his time is up, within a split second he's out of those clothes. A human can't do that. And therefore, a human is allowed to continue wearing them. Now, for how long? It's a big debate between Tosfos and the Rambam. Tosfos says only as ordinarily it would take to get undressed. Only have a few minutes, but you can't overstay. The Rambam says no. The Rambam says once you're allowed to overstay, you can the rest of the day. The Rambam says once you're in, you have the rest of the day. Wow. The Rambam's idea is, once you're telling me that these clothes have a special din that you're allowed to, overstay, so then, once you're in, you're in. Tosfos says no. It's only the requisite time it takes to get undressed, and the Eibusher's understanding for that, but not beyond. But either way, what the Gemara is saying is, since these clothes, the Kohen is allowed to have benefit, therefore, he's not able to be moyel, he's not able to misappropriate them. And therefore, if he uses them for Kiddushin, they don't lose their consecration because they're actually allowed to be used by the Kohen, at least to some extent. And therefore, when he uses them, he doesn't profane them. Therefore, they remain holy, and therefore the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. In other words, by regular items that you could misappropriate, the moment you give it to the woman, it's no longer hektish. You have to suffer the punishment for doing what you did, but you've misappropriated, it's become chulin, and the Kiddushin takes effect. Not the clothes of a Kohen, because he's allowed to have benefit from it, and therefore if he uses it for the Kiddushin, he hasn't misappropriated, it's still within the category of hektish, and therefore the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. That's that Gemara. That's another example of the idea, what do you want? Kohen's as great as Kohenim are, we love the Kohenim, right? But they're humans, you can't expect that the moment they have to be out of those clothes, they could click their fingers and boom, they're out. One last Gemara, number 5, Rav Papa Amar. It's a Gemara in Me'ilah, Daf Yudalad, that when they would build the Beis HaMikdash, when they would build any structure, the walls, when it was built, it was always made of non-holy money. After the structure was completed, they would consecrate, they would be makdish it, make it holy. Rav Papa, why? Why is it that whenever you build something by the Beis HaMikdash, you keep it chayil until it's finished and then you make it holy? Because Torah wasn't given to angels. What's going to happen is, you ever see builders, when builders build, you never see them working. They're always listening to the radio, there's breakfast, there's lunch. In Australia, there's a beer party. In England, there's afternoon tea. They're always, right? And things take a year later, nothing's happened. So the Gemara already says, Dilma boila mizga, they're going to lean. When someone's building a wall, you know what he does? Half the time he's leaning on the wall. The Zaga is going to lean on the wall. Ibana bekutsha, if you're going to build the wall with holy funds, ishtakach, it'll come out, the kamoil bekutsha, he was moil, he misused the holy funds by leaning on the wall. Now, this case is a bit different than the others, because the Chor, we should have said fakert, build it out of hektish, and let him lean, because Torah wasn't given to angels. Here we say the other way. Here we say,
you don't do that.
No. This Gemara doesn't prove, all the other three Gemaras prove there's a halachic leniency based on this. Here, it's because since we know you're not an angel, and if you're going to use it, so therefore we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So this is a little different, but this is the fourth time where the principle is used in Gemara. So the Gemara definitely uses it numerous, but 4 times is pretty good. The Rishonim talk about it to look at number 6. It's a letter of the Rosh. A letter of the Rosh. He's talking about if you have there's a way to kasher, glass, tray for glasses by leaving them in water for 72 hours. But every 24 hours you have to change the water 3 times.
3 times.
Because, every 24 hours you change. All and up, there's three instances of it soaking in water, 24 hours apiece, one after the other. Says the Rosh, V'day you should know. Ki nirali, it seems to me, shechazal kavu, zman lahachshir kli habalua yayin nesach. If the kli has tray for wine swallowed inside of it, al iru, it needs to be in water 3 days. Or b'chol me'es leis, every 24 hours, yera hamayim arishonim, you pour out the old water, v'yasem achen, you put new water. V'chein shira chachamim, and the chachamim estimated, shebechof talad shoyis, 24 hours, once 24 hours pass, the water is no longer effective. Palu hamayim pulasam, they've done what they can do, and therefore leaving them any longer is not going to help. Shuv lo yayilu aman, they're not going to help to be machshir the kli, and therefore you have to exchange it. Hilkoch b'chol me'es leis, every 24 hours, yichaven b'daitoi, try and make it exact, le'eres maim, to get rid of the maim rishonim. Vim lo yuchol letzamsem berega echad, what if you can't get the exact moment? What if you get it a drop early? Doesn't have to be perfect. But then he continues. But if one of the 3 days you poured out 2 hours early, you only got 22 hours, that doesn't count. Those waters don't count. In other words, 24 hours, 24 hours. If one of the days was only 22, it doesn't count. Only down to 2 days. And he says that, 24 hours has to be exact. But he also says how exact. You're a human. If you're a few seconds off.
No, when you're removing it itself, it takes some time.
Right. And also, the exact moment, exactly, you do your best. In other words, he says, if you take it out an hour too early, so then it doesn't count. But if you're moments off, it's fine. It's fine. So that's an important, in other words, so the Rosh saying you have to try and be as exact as possible. If you're an hour early, you blew the whole day. The whole day doesn't count. 23 hours isn't going to do it. Moments is okay. There's a Rashi Masechta Sukkah, it's not on the page. The Gemara there is discussing about sleeping in tefillin. And that really you're allowed to have a shinas ara, you're allowed to have a small doze in tefillin. While you're wearing tefillin, a shinas ara is okay. The issue is that if you doze off, you may get into a deeper slumber and you may pass gas. That's so passing gas is mamish. That's we had a shir a little while ago. That's mamish considered hesach hadas from like the tzitz, right? The Kohen Gadol couldn't put his hand above the tzitz, and it only has one name of Hashem. The tefillin has 42 names. So passing gas mamish be also d'oraisa. So therefore, Chacham said you can't fall into a deep slumber. But what about a doze off? You don't doze off because you may slumber and then you may pass. It's like a decree on a decree. So really, a small doze is okay. The reason we don't do this is because a small doze is actually quite short. According to some opinion, it's less than a minute. It's about 54 seconds according to some. Others hold we don't even know how to work it out and therefore don't do it at all. But in theory, the halacha is a small doze is okay in tefillin. So in theory, if you see somebody who's half asleep and he's nodding off a few seconds here, a few seconds there, so the big zealots will go and wake the guy, shake the guy up till the tefillin practically fall off his head. They shake him. Really, no, halachically is okay. Really it's a small doze. You leave it. You don't really have the right to make him crazy. B'chlal, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and other poskim paskim, if someone's sleeping and they're about to miss a minyan, you don't have to wake them up. Once they're sleeping, they're potter. They're not. Don't wake them up. Either they're going to miss mincha. The sun's going down. It's almost 6. You don't have to wake him up. He's potter.
You're not still Jew.
No, but even though you have arvus, you have responsibility. Exactly.
Not
Right.
If a person puts you in a situation where you're potter, you're not mechuyev to create a chiyuv.
Right. The guy put himself into a situation. He was up 10 minutes ago and he fell asleep with the siddur open.
He's a Jew.
He could also. No, once you're sleeping, when you're sleeping, you're in a matzav, you're potter.
You're no longer Jewish? You're
potter
to daven mincha.
You're potter for the mitzvah.
He's potter. He's potter. No, he's potter. Just like with the Gemara says, if somebody, let's say, God suffers from seizures, so the Gemara says during the seizure he's potter. If he ate the matzah during the seizure, it doesn't count. When he recovers, he has to eat again. Now there's a person right now he's sleeping. He's potter. He's not matzah of potter. In fact, if while he was sleeping he happened to eat it, the matzah, it could be it doesn't count. For the same reason that he's potter, you don't have to wake him up. It's just like the epilepsy, the seizure. Our paskin that taka doesn't count. The fact he didn't have kavanah is not an issue. Most poskim hold matzah doesn't need kavanah to be yotze because your body's enjoying it. But if you're sleeping, you're potter. Anyhow, fine. Back to our thing over here. So the verse like this. The Gemara says that you can't fall into a deep sleep, only a doze, a small doze. But the Gemara says, but if you manage to just take the tefillin off and put it just next to you and you cover it with something, then you're allowed to go for a good shlaf. You're allowed a good shlaf. So Rashi says, why don't we expect you to take care of your tefillin, wrap them up, put them somewhere where you're just going to take them, put them on the table, cover with a towel, and then go to sleep? Says Rashi, Torah is not given to malachim, we're humans. If someone's very tired, let the guy sleep. It's enough that he took off his tefillin and covered it. Do you expect the guy to have to have it? You have to rachmanis. That's what Rashi writes. So Rashi uses it, and these are all for halacha l'maisa, for things that, in each of these things you could tell the person do a better job, and in each of these things we say, no, you're not an angel. Fine.
But the daven's ma'ariv.
He's going to have
to...
Was he sleeping the entire time that he was chayiv in mincha?
No.
So then, if you were chayiv at some point and you were sleeping at the end of and you became potter at the end of the time, you'd have to make it up in the next.
Never heard that sleeping picks out a chiyuv.
Yeah. Well, you're hearing it here. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Well, in certain.
A yesh and potter min a mitzvah.
But Naltrei brings a discussion if you could have been mitzaref him to a minyan. There's a shaila if he could be one of the 10, because you only have to have 6 answering, but the other 4 have to be present. If they're sleeping, could be they're not even present. The shaila is you have to wake him up for him to be part of the 10. Here we're talking about you have to wake him up for his own benefit, and Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says no, it's bichlal not. He's potter. Anyhow,
you're potter from Krishma. You sleep in, you're potter from Krishma.
No, so Rabbi Yosef Kaya writes somewhere. It depends. If you went to sleep late, then it's called Tchilasa B'Pshiyah V'Soifa B'Oinus. If you started negligent and the end's an Oinus. The Gemara just says has a machlokes in Bab Metzia. When it comes to monetary cases, if someone starts off negligent and the end it's an Oinus, are you chayiv a potter? The halach is you chayiv. So Rabbi Yosef Kari uses it also for Krishma. If you go to sleep late and you wake up late, what do you expect? Taki, you were sleeping, but it was.
He works at night.
If that's your schedule, though, then you have to work it out. You have to make a way that it should work with creation. But if somebody went to sleep regular and mamash and oinus he slept through, taka, he's an oinus. More than as an oinus, he's sleeping, he's pashat potter. Right. Not just an oinus, he's potter. I'm not saying everyone agrees to this, but I'm just saying there are opinions out there. So if you see someone sleeping before you just know that yeshli amal ismay. Okay, so he'll be mashlim.
That means he was chayiv.
No, so I said that's if someone was chayiv a part of the time. If someone was chayiv, if someone fell asleep at 5 p.m., so he was chayiv in mincha. The end of the time he was potter, but since he was chayiv before, he'll have to make it up later. But if someone taka.
And he slept the whole afternoon.
If someone was sleeping the whole afternoon and there was no pshia involved at all, if somebody's ill and therefore couldn't, then maybe taka not, taka potter.
It doesn't have to be mashlim.
In a case that he would if there's no negligence, because if there's negligence, he's going to be considered chayiv. If someone slept through from 12 p.m. till whatever the whole mincha time and it's mamish and oinus, there's nothing that he could do. So then,
Well, what about
okay, but let's. It could be not. It could be you have to work out if you.
And you're taka potter. Now in the evening
Yeah.
you feel better.
Yeah.
You feel tushman
No,
or no?
No?
You were potter. Okay.
Lemaisa?
Yeah. Okay. So.
Chiddush.
It depends what type of illness. We're talking about an illness where a person's mind is not even there. If you're talking about an illness where a person just can't do it, he's an onus. That's different. When you're sleeping, it's not that you're an onus. You're b'chal not chal. You're b'chal potter. That's the argument we're saying. So it depends on the illness. If it's the illness that a person's mind is not even there, he's not even conscious. He's in a, God forbid, is in a, then taka. But if the illness is that he's awake, but he just can't muster the energy to do it, that's different. Then it's an onus, and then you would make it up. It would depend on the illness. Fine. So, al kaponim, you have this idea that Torah was given to human beings, not to angels. So what do you want? What do you want from the Jew? So, here's where things get interesting. Join me in number 7. Number 7 is a comment from the Aruch HaShulchan. Rabbi Epstein, Yechiel Michal Epstein. And we had a guy here at Ashir not too long ago who verified for us that he was in Navardok. That's where he had his bezdin. Famously had his bezdin in Navardok. The Aruch HaShulchan, he met the Tzemach Tzedek, lots of stories we spoke about in the past. He writes like this in number 7. It's in Siman Pei Daled, the long Siman about worms, Toiloyim, all about worms. Everything you wanted to know about worms. He says like this, Yesh mi shekasav, there are those that write, or someone that write, b'shem chachmei ateva, in the name of scientists. Da'mistako b'zchuchis hamagadels, if you look through a magnifying glass, shekorin spektiva. Yira b'chaimis, you'll see in vinegar, mole toiloim, full of worms. Do you know what's going on in vinegar? There is bacteria, there's microorganisms. Unbelievable, exactly. So he says like this, first of all like this, b'chaimis, the truth is by vinegar, ein chshash, is not a concern. Because there's a rule by worms, if the worms were created in an item after the item was separate from the ground, and the worms have not left the item, you're allowed to eat them. Meaning if you make cheese, and the cheese gets so moldy that worms start growing in it, like in Italy, the most expensive cheese has little things jumping out of it. Yeah. The most expensive cheese, you can see these maggots jumping out of it. And they relish the taste of these things. It's mutter. Because it's those worms and insects are created in the item after it's separate from the ground. And so if the insects jump away and come back, you can't eat them. But while they're inside, so it discusses, if it jumps away from the cheese and back, you can't have it. But if they're jumping all over the cheese from one side to the other, it's okay. That's the halacha. Not that if you're revolted, it's a separate issue called Baal Tashak, so you can't do things that revolt you. And I can't see how you're going to get out of that one. But over here, so he says like this, the worms which are created in an item which is separate from the ground, like vinegar, the Torah allows it. So the truth is the vinegar is fine, even if you could see the stuff. Omnam shamati, but I heard, all types of water. He's writing this in the end of the 1800s. Ubeyichud b'meik shamim, rainwater, mole bruyim dakim, is full of tiny organisms. She'ein ha'ayin yichalot, you can't see them. Ubeyaldusi, in my youth, shamati mipei echad shahaya b'merchakim, I heard from someone who came from far away, and he saw derech schuchis hamagadelas ad ma'oid, which is a microscope. Schuchis magadelas, if it enlarges, is a magnifying glass. Ad ma'oid will be a microscope. K'revavas pa'amim b'mayim, kol min ha'bruyim. There are myriads of amount of these bruyim you could see in the water. Well, how could you drink water? These insects in the water weren't created while the water was sitting in your cup at home. It's from the source. By the cheese, it's in the detached item. Or by a fruit, if you took the fruit off the tree and there was no worms in it, and then now it starts to, then it's okay. But if the worm comes from the source, it's a problem. Now over here, these worms come from the source. The water always had it. He said like this: the truth is, the Torah never prohibited something you can't see. That's the answer. The Torah wasn't given to angels. He uses the same idea. The Imloi Kain, many scientists will tell you that the air around you is full of bruyim, dakim, and atakim, tiny organisms in every breath you take. When you open your mouth, you know how many you're swallowing. You don't even want to know how many you're swallowing. Elavadai hevel yaft sapiyem. It's not considered anything. It's fine. So va'af im kain hu, probably could be. So too over here by the worms in the water. Kivan she'einan shaletis b'em lav klum. If you can't see it, it's fine. Omnam b'mashayim, but the eye could see, even if it's only in front of the sun, and even if it's the tiniest of the smallest thing, that's a sheretz gomer. So anything the eye can see, even if it's only while you're holding it next to the sun, and even though it's the smallest thing you could imagine, but if you can see it, it's a sheretz gomer. It's biblically a problem.
What's the issue? Why, if something comes in afterwards, is
that we learn out from the psukim in this week's parsha? It says only if it's sheretz ala aretz, on the earth, which means if they existed in the item while it was attached to the ground, or if it came later but it spread out of the item to the earth and then back to the item. But if it only was created while the item was detached and it never left the item, it's okay. It's okay.
It becomes part of the food.
Yeah. So the Aruch HaShulchan writes black and white that anything which you can't see, it doesn't hurt you. It's not a problem at all. By air and by the insects in the water. Okay.
So all this mishigas with the microscope.
Whoa! Not so fast. Let's read a little bit. Two tshuvas of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Look at number 8. Somebody wrote to Rav Moshe, when is a person considered alive? When are they considered dead? When is the end of life? You know, the brain dead, the cessation of breathing, the heart, the pulse. So this guy wrote to Rav Moshe, if somebody has no signs of breathing, no sign of life at all, no heart, no pulse, no breath, nothing, you attach him to a machine, and all of a sudden the machine detects that there's the heart's still working. He wrote to Rav Moshe.
What year was this?
I don't know, 40, 50 years ago maybe.
1900s.
Probably the 70s, yeah, somewhere around there. So the guy writes to Rav Moshe that, wait a second, why are you allowed to eat insects that you can't see? Or breathe the air? Why? Because Torah was given to humans, to human chushim, to perception, to what you can see, what you can hear, and you don't have to go under a microscope. You don't need a magnifying glass. Halacha doesn't recognize that. Halacha recognizes regular chushim, the regular perception, the regular human experience. Well, if the regular human experience tells you this guy is dead, then the machine should be irrelevant. That's what the person wrote. Okay, hold on a minute. Look at number 8. That if the doctors royim tguvas alev electric by the radiogram, if the doctors are able to tell through the machine that the heart's still pumping, and this guy wants to einay klum, it doesn't count. V'nechshav meis, he's dead as long as he doesn't breathe anymore. This is what this rabbi wanted to say. You're allowed to eat vinegar, even though you know it vinegarizes through worms that you can see with a microscope. And the reason is because because the Torah only prohibits things you could see. The rabbi of Brisk during the times of Chaim Brisker was Reb Simcha Zelig Rieger. Was a big rav, a big paisik. They actually once asked Reb Chaim Brisker that you know Reb Simcha Zelig and you know Reb Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the Ur Sameach. And they asked Reb Chaim Brisker, would you compare the two? So Reb Chaim said that the Meir Simcha of Dvinsk wrote the Ur Sameach on the Rambam. It's an incredibly deep commentary. Reb Simcha Zelig couldn't have written that commentary. But I will tell you that Simcha Zelig can paskin a din like nobody else. Reb Chaim Brisker said if Mashiach would come today and the Beis Mikdash would be built, any shayla the Kohanim would have, they could ask Simcha Zelig on the spot and he would have the answer. So So when it comes to halacha l'maisa, he was the king. He was the king. Comes to lamdas, the Ur Sameach had an up. Each one had their specialty. But Reb Simcha Zelig said, Asher Kain Amar Hagoyin Reb Chaim Alevi Mibrisk. Reb Simcha Zelig says he heard from Reb Chaim Brisker that the Torah never prohibited things you can't see. So we saw it from the Aruch HaShulchan. But apparently Reb Chaim Brisker said the same thing, Reb Simcha Zelig, and this guy says to Reb Moshe. So Reb Moshe says, you don't have to, what's it called when you quote people, you don't have to quote. Name sourcing, whatever it might be.
Drop names.
Name dropping. You don't have to bring a rye from vinegar. Everyone, the air is full of it, and of course, in every single breath you take, you swallow thousands or maybe millions of them. And it's obvious the Torah obviously never prohibited that. You can't live. So that's obvious. Of course, I agree to that. But this guy wants to go to the next step and say, well, if the Torah doesn't care about the microscope, we shouldn't care about the machine that sees the guy's heart still pumping. When it comes to the blood of a woman, she shows it to the Rav. The Rav looks at it. The Rav is supposed to use daylight, but not sunlight. You're supposed to take it outside. You want to have daylight. You don't have an actual sun, and you look at it, and the Rav looks at it and looks okay. There's a tiny drop that might look a little red. The Rav looks fine. You take it to the microscope, you're going to see there's a red blotch over there. Makes no difference. That's fine. Reb Simcha Zelig Rieger says we don't care. Even if you know that if you look through the microscope, it'll be there. Because that's not how you judge halacha. V'chein loy b'revuah shel tefillin. The tefillin have to be square. Perfect. No, if it looks square, it seems square is good enough. And upegim sakin l'shchita v'kedema. The shochet checks. He cuts off half his hand, some skin off his hand. He checks. He does with his nail and everything. It seems fine. That's it. If you look in a microscope, you'll see that it's not perfect. Makes no difference. These things we all know. We don't need proof, and you don't need all those names you quoted. It never was brought in Gemara that you need superhuman effort. And what about the 2,000 years that have passed where they didn't have these tools? You're saying they didn't keep Torah properly? Microscope, of course. Or borrow that they kept the whole Torah and they weren't nichshel in anything, even by accident. It must be that it's perfectly fine. In other words, you could have said if your tefillin aren't exactly perfect, you did the best you can, you're an einus. He says, no. Einus means that, it was an accident. No, it's better than that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine in all these cases. You don't need the microscope. So, but you want to compare this to considering a person dead, to say that even though the doctors see through the radiogram that there's a teguvah slave, the heart is moving, there's movement, and is considered dead, Nira Lefian is died to Anakin. I don't agree with you, says Reb Moshe. And he quotes a letter of the Chassam Sofer. It says in Masechtas Smachos, Poiktin ala mesim ad gimel yomim. Back in the day when they would bury someone, they little It was a kuch, it was a little hole in a cave. For 3 days after death, they would go and visit the guy to make sure he's taka dead. Umaisa, there's a story, Shepok to Echad, they visited a guy who was taka alive, they took him out, he lived for 25 years. Now, the poskim say this was done back in the day when the guy was just lying in like a little morgue. It's like a little cave in the ground. You go in, you pull him out. But now that we bury someone underground, we don't do this. We're not going to dig him up, But says.
Because we have machines today that are able to, back then, I guess, guy came, he was sick, he was in a coma, could have came out of the coma.
On the other hand, if you tested with all the means you have and the guy considered to be dead, why would you worry? But so the some surfaces are like this. What it says in Masechtas Smachos means that it's a far off possibility the guy's alive. And therefore, if you do it, it's not considered darchei amoyri. It's not considered a goyish voodoo, black magic rituals to go visit these dead people, because it's possible the guy's alive. But it's so distant, even miyutim, it's so uncommon that's why you don't have to worry. That's why you're allowed to bury him. Why are you allowed to bury the guy the moment he's not breathing anymore? Because after Inyan, even though you're dealing with somebody's life, you don't have to be concerned for something so far-fetched that even though there's no symptoms of life, the guy's still alive. It's so outlandish, you don't have to be concerned. You can bury the guy. But you can still visit him after, just in case. She says, so that's what the Chassam Sofer says. It says, Moshe Feinstein, but wait a second. Im came b'misha roin, if you see through the radiogram that his taka, he has a bit of chayas, then you know that he is part of that very outlandish case. Until before then, you don't know, so you don't have to be concerned. But this tells you that this is the outlandish case. Hari al oifen zeh leka shuv. You can't say most people in such a case die, because this you could say most people when you're looking at the you take a step back and you look at all cases, but now you know this is the random case, and in this random situation, most people will continue to live. Anyhow, so Al Kapanim, he tainas very strongly that the guy is still alive. The guy's still alive. But he does agree in all other cases. He says by shchita, by tefillin, by the blood for the nida, by the air, by the insects, anything you can't see, the Torah never prohibited it. Okay? Rav Moshe takes us further in number 9. In number 9 is another letter where he speaks about somebody who can't hear unless they have a hearing aid. Says Rav Moshe, if somebody can only hear through a hearing aid, are they considered like they can hear? There's certain halachas that don't apply to someone if they can't hear. Take Megillah, for example. If somebody's deaf but they can talk, are they chayiv in Megillah? So they can hear but they could read. So there's a big discussion. The mitzvah of Megillah is to read. That's the bracha al mikra Megillah, to read. Now this guy could read, but he can't hear. By women, the Rishonim say the women's chiyuv is not to read, is to hear. We discussed before Purim. By women, the chiyuv is to hear the Megillah. By men, the chiyuv is to read. So it'd be funny, by a woman who's deaf, she would be potter, because the chiyuv of women's to hear, she can't. By men, the chiyuv is to read. If the guy can talk but can't hear, maybe he should have to read. On the other hand, maybe someone that can't hear,
What if you can't taste? More equals taste.
Well, now, COVID.
well, they wouldn't feel the pain in their head by the mar?
More you can't taste.
No, but you still get the rush. No. No, it has to be. What?
I'd say you have no taste.
No, sriracha is different because that burns the tongue. I'm talking about morer that goes through the nostrils. No, it must, no.
It's not them use lettuce, so you can't.
Yeah, that's it. They have the potato. First they start with the potatoes for karpas. They can't handle the onion, then they can't handle them. Anyhow, but let's go over here. So says Rav Moshe, Avaloi mistaber, it doesn't make sense lahachshivay shemea. If a guy cannot hear unless he wears his hearing aid, he's not considered eligible to hear. And it doesn't. You can't compare it to shmi kishmedabim loy bekoil ram. Someone that can hear, if you shout in their ear, they can hear. Because nobody's power of hearing is exactly the same. So where are you going to draw the line? Or Dishmiya Aidei Chatzaitzra. If you have a little trumpet, you put the large side by the guy, so you talk through it, the guy can hear. If someone is hard of hearing,
his own guy, he had a chatzoritzes to hear and Shabbos.
Like a microphone.
it's coming from the right.
Put
Okay,
the
fine.
horn
Yeah,
in his
exactly.
ear.
Yeah. That is right.
It's like a
The
microphone.
Pashut, he says, those are different. An electric hearing aid is a different category. If it's natural means, and he learns electric is not considered natural. And there's a letter of the Chazon Ish why that would be.
Battery.
What?
Battery.
Battery. Yeah. Power.
There's a show in the Hamptons on Shabbos that they announce it through one of these. They
Like
do
a
a trumpet.
microphone.
It's a-
The
it's a
Pashi says,
natural
"Kol in Yonei Atorah Dunkvi." All in Yonim of Torah are judged based on what you see, what you hear. Be'etzem, by the natural capabilities of the human being, not through machines and simile. Ukumai shrotzim, like insects, shaloi nir, you can't see them unless you have a magnifying glass. Enichum doesn't count, because the whole avir, the whole atmosphere that you breathe, is full of shrotzim. Ke'ela shenikru mikrobin. Sha'idei spectiva, through the microscope you could see them. Hamagdal erech elef pam v'yoser, you could see them, but there's no problem. The Torah never prohibited that. He says over here that in a microscope you'll see that the letter in the tefillin and mezuzahs have a crack.
Yeah.
A break.
Not a problem.
Full breaks probably under microscope.
Under microscope that. You think so? When the Eibishter looks from Shemaim, the Eibishter sees like a microscope. The Eibishter looks at the mezuzah. What mezuzah? There's no letter. The answer is it's the way we see it. He says, if you loy near lying batzma, if your eye can't detect the problem, it's not a hefsek, it's kosher. The kadoyim bahar ben yonim. So these are two different letters of Rav Moshe, but you see, he's taking the same path. V'lochen, therefore, so to someone who can't hear unless he has the machine, since he can't hear on his own, is not considered that he can hear. He's considered deaf. And you can't compare it if you shemeh k'shemedabrim b'kol ram. If the only way he can hear is through screaming, that's a different story. That's considered hearing. How many wives will say, right, that my husband can't hear, unless I scream. Oh, so he can hear, right? Eichos Hashmi is not similar by all people, and there's no where you're going to draw the line. And therefore, also, if you can only hear through a loud voice, it's good. What about a chatzoitzra? So here, Reb Moshe Feinstein has a chiddush. There's a big difference between the trumpet or the funnel, whatever that tool is, versus the battery-powered, electric-powered hearing aid. And that is, b'shmiya aydei chatzoitzra, since it's davar hamotzui, since it's common, and also the shmiya through this is not a davar mechudesh. I think we need to bring in a letter of the Chazon Ish who says like this. The Gemara says the world is 6,000 years. 2,000 years of chaos, Torah, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of Yemos Mashiach. He says in the 2,000 years of Torah, that's when all the halacha was decided. And, it ended basically with the times of the Tanoim. And that's when all of the halacha was decided based on the scientific knowledge that was known at the time. And boom, that's it. And that's where the buck stopped. The Amoraim come and they want to explain what the Tanoim meant. That's fine. We're still explaining what they meant till today. But the trumpet is something they would have had back then as well. So any tool that would have existed at that time would be part of the corpus of halacha. Technology came too late. It's a Johnny come lately. It's too late. And therefore does not affect the rules of halacha. The Moshe doesn't quote it, but I think you need with that it makes it much more understood, the difference of the funnel versus the hearing.
You can also say that there's a qualitative difference. The funnel takes the same sound and funnels it, the electronic, I don't know exactly how it works. But
Amplifies it through the horn.
it doesn't take the actual
transformer.
sound. Exactly. Versus the
So
transformer.
in effect, the Torah is oblivious to any future high tech.
That's according to Chazon Ish. So let's see what the Moshe says. He says, first of all, it's not so
The
common.
microphone takes the sound and converts it to electric.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a different sound. It's a different sound.
It's like a Tekea Babur
The
Leon.
machine.
That's what it is.
making
Like-
it.
like-
I hear, but Rav Moshe is going down a different argument, but that's all true. Rav Moshe's argument is that Gam 6 lines from the bottom. Listening through the chatzayt is not a dover mechudesh. Ela machmas shem misyached hadibur rak la'oznai. It sends all the sound waves to his ears, so it's amplified. So he quotes a Pri Chodesh that this is considered natural hearing. Ma'acha shaloi kolab, because no one's perfect anyways. So as long as someone can hear, it's good enough, even though it's bekushi gadol. Ava mechuna idei electric, but if it's through electric, shu shmiya, de koyach mechadish. It could be Taki's trying to say what you're saying. Could be he's saying that when you hear through the electric, you're actually not hearing the original sound. He doesn't say it clearly though. He's saying it's a koyach mechadish. It's an outside source. You're losing electricity, an outside source, to consider you a shemeya, but you yourself can't hear. It doesn't.
Because
you yourself are not a shemeya klal betzim. If he was saying the argument you're saying, he should have said even better. You're bechlal. What you're hearing, you're not even hearing the outside sound. He doesn't say those words.
Also, in another letter, speaks about one's hearing aid, whether that would constitute hearing of Megillah and so on and so forth.
That's this letter. That's this letter.
Okay.
Right here.
This is,
man.
it's a
It
long
says
letter.
yes.
I took out this excerpt.
So this is the same thing. But he says okay.
No, you're right. You can't hearing hearing Megillah or something over a telephone.
Okay. Hearing aid is okay.
For what? To be yoitze?
Yeah, I believe in.
Well,
I believe it's another. I've seen it where he can't be Yotze Shmiya because that's part of his ear. Becomes part of his ear.
Okay, here he wants
I
to
think
say
that's-
the guy's
I think that's
potter
it.
because his
I have
Bechlal
to-
can't hear, so he's
I have to
Bechlal
look-
potter.
I have to look it up.
He does give another argument, could be his
A lot of
chayiv
people have
because
hearing aids.
one.
They have hearing aids.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's yeah one.
I have myself a get. Rabbi Leifel told me that the only one that says that you can't make a shliach l'Kabbalah over a telephone is the Rebbe. He told me that if you have two shluchim, you'd have her make you a shliach l'Kabbalah.
That makes sense because the knowledge has to be passed. But like to be yoitze something, to be yoitze Megillah by telephone, nobody would allow.
Testified that they heard that. They didn't hear her.
So there's, but not just that. When it comes to binoculars, many poskim say witnesses can't even say what they saw through binoculars.
Wasn't it? So the
About
problem
glasses.
is anyone that has a hearing
Glasses
aid
is
should
a-
make his own kiddush, should make his own kriyas atayra.
Well,
No.
that's that. Well, according to the
saying
argument
no.
that was said that the hearing aid, you're not hearing the real voice.
Right.
So then it's like listening to Megillah over a telephone. It shouldn't work.
So then everyone with a hearing aid should have to read their own Megillah. Make
Yeah, but that's don't
not
look
what
at me.
Moshe's
Moshe's
saying.
not going down that path.
He's saying that if you're able to hear when somebody's screaming in your ear,
It's
then just
considered
because
your
you have
hearing.
Then just
This is
because
considered
helping
an
you,
external-
You're still good enough.
Right.
But the helping you is not making a new voice.
That's he's not talking here about a new voice, not a new voice.
Yeah.
He's not saying that argument.
The
He's
hearing aid
saying
doesn't
that
make it a new voice.
the hearing aid is an
that's what he's
outside.
It's an outside amplifier.
Right, not amplified. He does say over here, if someone,
It's not synthesizing
if someone
the
can,
voice.
if you can hear a drop and the hearing aid amplifies, it would be okay because you still consider hearing.
But the hearing aid doesn't amplify. The hearing aid remakes, it rebuilds.
That's okay. That's the argument that's being said. Beside that's
He
not.
said it of Mechudash.
No, he doesn't mean that. He doesn't say that. It's
not
a
the
koyach-
koyach
no, he
mechadish.
means to say that. He doesn't say the voice is. He's talking about the koyach of there's a koyach mechudash. Anyhow, so there's a number of things I didn't get on the sheet. There's a lot of these. When it comes to glasses, it's very delicate, so I'm not going to get into it. But we had by Kiddush Levana we discussed of
at it.
seeing through the
Yeah,
Levana
some
through.
people-
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you should take
I
off the
do.
glasses for Kiddush
I
Levana.
take it off for a moment. I said,
Kiddush-
it says that you can't to be Mekadosh Halidei Zechuchis unless there's no other choice. To a
Right, so
window.
we discussed the
Unless it's
different
the last
shittas
day
by
and you
Kiddush
can't do it.
Levana. We discussed cases if it's cold outside and you're indoors and you can see through. They also did if you see the Levana through a mirror or it's actually directly through the glass.
Yeah, you have to squint. What do you think?
The Tiferes Yisrael case, you're talking about a Talmud of Rabbi Kiva Egis. You're talking about 150 years ago. So he was very up to date in the sciences. It was in Germany. And he discusses a certain fish that for generations people didn't eat because you couldn't see the scales. Couldn't see the scales.
The sturgeon. No?
There it is.
Which caviar.
So for hundreds of years they didn't eat it. And he says, but Mitzvah, he writes that 50 years ago, so over 200 years ago, someone through a microscope was able to see that there's. So he wants to like this. On the one hand, maybe something which the Yidden refrained from eating for generations becomes osir, becomes a minig not
It's
to
a
eat it.
separate issue.
So he says no, because the whole minig was based on a reason. If a minig is based clearly on a reason, and you find out the reason is not true, the whole minig falls off. It's a minig batos. It's an accidental custom. That's what he says. But he says something else. He says, you know why you can't eat it? That's not called scales. He says, the Torah says you have to be able to see things, hear things with your natural chushim. If you need a microscope, it's like it doesn't exist. It's not scales. It's not scales. It doesn't exist. So that's a chumrah. That's in the case of a chumrah. Those aren't called scales, even if they're there.
So
That's
what
not.
was this whole water thing?
That's what I'm saying.
Hold on. So that was a case of a chumrah. Another case of a chumrah was the Doiviv Meishorim, the Chabina Rav, a fascinating personality, a big gun. Fascinating. He was through the Holocaust. He was in Siberia. He was all over the world. He had an incredible life story. A big lamdan, and actually during the Holocaust, the Nazis were after him. They publicized he's the biggest Talmudist today. They were after him to get him, and he ran to Russia, into the USSR, to get sanctuary somewhere in Lvov, and then the Russians caught him. You're a legal citizen. They threw him to Siberia. A ganze Geschichte. Never all of his kids were killed in the Holocaust, but he lived the end of his life in Eretz Yisrael. The Chabina Rav. Weidenfeld was his last name. So he wrote the Doiv of Meishorim. It's a good shuvas for him. First shuvah. He talks about, you have a Sefer Torah, and you see Moshe Feinstein mentioned the case that the letter looks good, but a microscope you see cracks. What about the other way? You have two letters, they look adjoined, but through a microscope you'll see that they're not joining. So here you want to use the microscope for a leniency. He says you can't.
Same thing.
He says you can't, yeah. As far as the Abish is concerned, they're not connected. In truth, they're not connected. No. You have to follow your chush, and again, a case of a chumrani pasal, you have to scratch it off. You can't use it. It's possible. A case of a leniency, it's called, the Sefer is called the Even Yukara. It's also Chuvas Even Yukara. This guy is Betzalel, what was his last name? Maybe it's Weiss, maybe it's Weiss. Anyhow, this guy was a big Rav in the 1800s, the Even Yukara. Actually, coming Pesach, he was pro machine matzah, like his teacher, Yosef Shaul Nathanson. Anyhow, I think the last name was Weiss. But the Even Yukara was a big Rav in the 1800s, and it came to his attention microfilm. When you can get the whole Tanakh or something on it, you look at it, what do you see?
Microfiche.
But you need with the special, or even sometimes a magnifying glass. Right. So he was asked, are these things considered holy?
Yeah.
Could you bring it to the bathroom?
No.
He says, without a question, it's not holy. There's nothing to it. If you can't see it with your eyes, it's nothing. It's nothing. But he says, since it was the purpose of it is the whole Tanakh, you're going to take into the bathroom, it's not respectful, it's a bizoyan. But as far as the Kedusha, there's no Kedusha. So you're allowed to put something on top of it, A Tanakh, you wouldn't put anything on top. This, you're allowed to put something on top of it. Not a problem. Take it to the bathroom. I wouldn't do it, he says, because, not that he says, even the special magnifying glass, which is used just for that, I wouldn't take that to the bathroom either, because it's designated for a holy purpose. But it's not holy, you can't read it. Rabbi Avadia Yosef, more contemporarily, paskin the same way. Rabbi Avadia Yosef, a couple of decades ago, paskin the same way. You can't, and he says, what's the difference between the worms you can't see? It doesn't bother you. So then, so tov, these words you can't see, they don't exist. Reb Menashe Klein, a big Rav in Borough Park, said like this: well, what's the amount? When do the words become holy? So he brought a raya. It says in Halacha that when you're writing, so you want between each word should be a space of one letter, and between each letter you want at least a space of a hair's breadth.
Yeah.
So between each letter, a chut hasayir, a hair's breadth. Between each word, you want more than that, the space of a letter. That means a letter, by definition, is more than a hair's breadth.
Yeah.
He says if the size of the letter is a hair breadth or less, it's not considered a letter. So he used this halacha to come with a definitive.
On those little micro.
And if the letter is less, it's more than a hair's breadth, it's bechal nothing. What do you mean, Lashon Kodesh? What do you mean? If it's
according to that writing. So according to that writing, there is the space of
a hair's breadth is a hair's breadth, but a hair's breadth is a hair. The chut hasayir is a chut
you
hasayir.
can't change the.
A chut hasayir is a chut hasayir. You see from that halacha that a letter is by definition bigger than a chut hasayir.
Yes, you said before that a minig that the town is bottle or it's a mistake that you don't.
That's what the Tiferes Yisrael says about this fish.
Well, in general, for example, why don't Ashkenazim wear talesim now at the age of bar mitzvah? It was all because of aniyas that doesn't apply now. When do you say minig of a sin v'yedenu? When do you say no, it's bottle?
These are good questions. These are big questions. By many gzeiros of the Chacham as well, some things we say that since the issue is no longer around, right, batla siba, something, Taisus wants to say about playing music, now that we don't know, the issue is you might be masak in the cliche, but now that most people don't know how to do that, it should be okay. Or having medicine on Shabbos if we're not going to be... sometimes we say, sometimes we don't.
Right. Told me that his father told him to put talis. Rabbi Teitelbaum told me his father told him to put talis from his
but we
birth.
still do it.
We do it.
But by Mayim Megulim, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins water. They worried for a snake. Now that there's no snakes around,
the Rambam holds it's only a minute. Alpha B'Lechein, we do it because it was a very strong minute based on Torah. Okay. So some minhagim believe without the
these are big questions about when but I'm just saying the Faisal says about this.
There is no clear definition.
There's different opinions. Some say it depends when it was said. When it was said, was it always said together with the reason, or was said without the reason? That makes a big difference, because then maybe there's more to it than just the reason that was given. That's a big one. Anyhow, so
we discussed that in the Matzah Shmurish here, by the way.
Could be, yeah.
These angles.
Anyhow, so that's so by microfilm, these three poskim very clearly hold there's no kedusha in it. B'vad Yosef, the Evan Yekara, not that the Maharsham as well, the Maharsham. Shalom Mordechai Shvadron. That's a crazy story, and we're basically finished. The Maharsham was one of the big poskim in the 1800s. When he was a boy, a bocher, he sat and learned all day and night. Apparently, when he was in his upper teens, became extremely unwell. He was teetering between life and death. His family was around him, and they thought he had passed. And all of a sudden, he regains consciousness, and he says, "You wouldn't believe what I saw." A near-death experience. He saw that he was being judged in heaven, and all he did was learn all day. He wasn't playing Game Boy or worse. He was But a malach came and said, "You think this guy he learned ever for God? He was learning for himself. He learned for himself. It was for his own knowledge." And Taka, he was found guilty. He was found guilty of that crime, and a group of malachim came to take him away. He was going to die. And all of a sudden, a voice comes in Bez Shemal and says, almost 2,000 years in Golus, and you expect a person to learn from the Eibishter? Not enough the guy's learning, he has to learn the Shema? You should be happy the guy's learning. How could you expect him? Made a whole ruckus. So the Bezdin reconvened. They found him innocent. So now those same malachim were going to bring his soul back to his body. He's going to live. So he asked those escorting him, "Who was my defender over there?" So they lifted him up, and he sees it was the Rebbe of Zidachov. This was the second Rebbe. The first Rebbe of Zidachov was Reb Tzvi Hersh, and this was his son, Reb Yitzchak Isaac of Zidachov. Now his family apparently had gone to the Zidachov Rebbe, and he didn't. He was busy learning, whatever. So when he recovered and he told the family the story, they said, "Now you got to go. Now you got to go." So he went to the Zidachover, and the moment he came into the Rebbe's room and he sees it's mamash the same face, He pushed fainted. Anyhow, when he recovered, the Zidachover told him, in heaven they were makel with you. They were lenient with you to give you another chance. He says, your job in life is to be lenient with other Yidden. You're going to be a rov of poor people. Make sure the halacha shouldn't, bust their chops. Make sure you find leniencies for them. So throughout his life, people would attack him for certain leniencies. But the story, he got this lesson from when he was young. This was his life mission. Incredible story. Yeah. So the Marsham is also, he says that if you can't see it, it's not considered holy. So what's the deal with the bug? So here's the thing. There is a letter of Rabbi Yaakov Emden. I couldn't get it on the paper, but it's in the Chelik Beis, whatever, the She'ilas Yavitz, Yaakov Emden's letters. And in it, he writes about checking things for bugs with a magnifying glass. He writes about it. So some say, it was a personal chumrah. He's writing there about what he would personally do. But there is an approach which says like this. You can't see the bugs in the air. You can't see the bugs in the water. What you can't see doesn't exist. Yeah? The tefillin looks square, it's good enough. The woman's blood looks clean, it's fine. But if you know there's something there, but you can't tell exactly what it is, if you know that there's something to suspect, then you can't play ignorance. You can't play oblivious, and you have to verify. You have to verify. If you don't know, then you have to verify.
It flies in the face of science today. We know that metal has
No.
microscopic...
No. It's not about knowing. If you can see it with your eye.
How do you see it? If you're using
If on top of the
glass.
water there's a layer of particles that you could see. You don't know. Is that dust or insects? You don't know what it is. Hold on. Before you shake your head like that, hold on. There are those that argue, but there are many that I think the Chazon
We just
Ish
read all the
Paskin
ones that argue.
No.
different.
This is all different.
He's saying
In
something that
all
you
the
can
cases
see,
of the
but you can't
Moshe,
tell what it
the
is.
tefillin looks square. You don't see an issue. I, with the microscope, see an issue. Not a problem. Here we're talking about if you see that there's something swimming around, you don't know what it is, then you have to verify.
Yeah,
and they
all
want to
these water
use
stuff. Show me what you see in that water. What the thing.
I don't. No, I don't. But
Yeah.
if I would.
If you would, nobody does. They still make crazy things.
No,
You put
tap
things
water,
over
tap water.
You don't see anything in tap water.
No, what were those bugs called? There was a name.
Before they
Copper-
put the filters in the tap water.
Copper bugs,
In
exactly.
Florida,
But there's different. Right. So the question is, here's the thing. Some time that those things was that you could even see them swimming around, so you could see them. Finish. Others said even if you can't see them swimming around, so you don't know exactly what they are, but if you see them and you know there's a question, you can't play ignorance. And they want to use this letter of Rabbi Yaakov Emden. I think the letter of Yaakov is talking about a personal chumrah that he had, but people want to use this as a rule that whenever you can. If you see something there and don't know what it is, you can't play ignorance.
Rabbi Shvei
But
explained the strawberries. If you take it and you bang it on a light, and then you see the little things moving. Then,
But on the strawberry, you look at it, you wash it, you this and that, you see nothing.
no.
So then,
You take it and you knock it on a light.
so that's another question. That's Bechlal. So, yeah.
I saw another angle.
So where are they though? They're on the edges. You just can't see them.
Yeah,
So they're hiding. They're hiding.
You know,
Half of the strawberry.
They're
right?
hiding.
Isn't there a Gemara
So that's
that
already
they
another
ate
issue.
Strawberries? Annoying
Strawberry,
strawberries.
I don't know.
It's
Berries,
already
lots of berries.
Identified as something they ate.
in
Ate
terms,
lots of
terms of what
berries,
you're
yeah.
saying
They didn't
about
have
London, I saw another angle from someone else, I don't remember who it was, who writes that what's shot if you know it's there but you can't see it. If someone else saw it,
Oh,
but I can't
someone
see it,
that's,
on the basis of someone else's Eidos L'Moshel, then I'm equipped to go and check
So-
with an instrument.
Rabbi
There's,
Asher-
there's
so
that
I
actually-
don't
there
remember
was
who I saw it.
There reminds me of sorry, but it's just the in Syria back in the 1600s or 1700s. I remember seeing a whole bunch of chuvas from the rabbi was Rabbi Laniado in Aleppo, and so there's a whole argument that they said about alei gefen. Grape leaves is like a very popular food. So the old rabbis, they all said it's permitted, no problem at all whatsoever, because they looked and they couldn't see any of the bugs. But the young rabbis, they were able to see the bugs, and they said it's a problem for generations.
Right.
There was like the community that ate the alei gefen and the community that
Okay, the
didn't
young
eat the
ones
alei
have better
gefen.
eyesight or they use machinery? The young rabbis.
No, it was the 1600s. It was 400 years ago.
So
It was
better
just
eyesight.
Better eyesight.
better eyesight.
Better eyesight.
They say your eyes get better when you get older, no? But
point
so
in reality,
Rabbi
eventually.
Asher Weiss in Eretz Yisrael has a few opinions about this. First of all, he takes this Rabbi Moshe about the hearing aid throw. He doesn't agree. He believes there's no difference of the trumpet versus the hearing aid. He said it's considered mamish hearing. It's considered mamish hearing. That's one thing he takes apart. Then he has a long article that he wrote against someone who says exactly what was mentioned now. That what if you don't see it, but you don't need a microscope to see it. Rather, the guy next door sees it. Other humans can see it with their natural faculties, but you don't. What do you do? What if someone says they see the problem, but you don't? Can you indulge, or you have to say, if other people see it, it could be seen? So this other rabbi said, if someone else can see it, it means it can be seen. If it can be seen, it's a problem. And Rabbi Osher says, no. It has to be able to be seen to you.
So if you have bad
If it
vision,
can't be
Usher Weiss
seen
is
to
gonna say you're okay?
No. If it's weak vision is enough. If it's officially weak.
Somebody who's wearing glasses, you take off your glasses.
If
can't
you
see
have
it.
a license, so it's good enough for the country. If you consider that you can see, then you can see. If you're allowed to drive, then you can see. And Rabbi Osher Weiss says if you're considered someone that could see, right? And the driver's license, and you look and you see nothing, even though 10 people around you said they see, you know what you tell them? So you can't have it. I can.
But that's a problem.
It's up to each person.
Yeah, I'm going over
based
to
on what
somebody's
you
house.
see.
I don't want to rely on his bad vision to eat a bug. You know what I mean? There should be an objective standard. You know what I mean? If you can see it, if some guy can't see it, but 10 people around them, then clearly your vision isn't as good as the 10 people around. I shouldn't.
But let's just wrap up. This is what Rashi says in this week. Moshe Rabbeinu showed to the Yidden the insects they could or couldn't eat. That means anything that he couldn't show them.
Yeah,
it's
that
not
makes
a problem.
sense.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem. Anything
we're
you can't
assuming
see.
Moshe had great vision, and not worse than everybody.
Hashem showed it to him, then he showed it to the Yidden to be able to see it. The problem is, did he show them things that you can see what they are? What about the darga we mentioned of something that you can't see what it is, but that it is? So you were timing if you that just because you see there's something you don't know what it is, it shouldn't count. The Shevet Halevi, Rav Vosner, the big Rav in Eretz Yisrael, he taka says that even if there's something there, a tiny black dot, but you stare at it, nothing moving, nothing doing, it looks like a particle of dust. Even though you're not sure, he said it's okay.
But if it is
so he disagreed. No, if it's moving, if you see a thing moving on your strawberry,
you know it's a bug.
You know what it is. But he says so. In other words, the idea we mentioned that if you see it and you don't know what it is, then you have to verify. It's not unanimous. The Shevet Halevi.
It is a chazaka by certain vegetables.
You're right. No, chazaka would make a difference if l'chera, unless I don't know. If all the vegetables only have that same tiny particle, then they're all mutter. Anyhow, but he disagrees on this entire notion.
There's a company called Brodek, right? So they
That was the big. If you